Today we're going to talk about the need to quit hiding. So here's how I want to get into this. I want to show you something, and I'd like a little audience participation. Can you guys tell me what this is? Hashtag, right? If you're a little bit older, you're thinking tic-tac-toe. We're not playing tic-tac-toe. Although that'd be fun, wouldn't it? We ought to do that some weekend. But that right there is a hashtag. A hashtag is sort of like a label. So whatever follows the hashtag, that's what identifies or labels it. Now here's what I want to do to kind of teach this concept. I'm going to show you guys some hashtags, and I'd like you to participate, okay? So if these hashtags, if you can relate to them at all, I'd like you to make a little noise, okay? I know we're in church, and I know we're in the South, but it's okay to have fun in church in the South, okay? So feel free to join along. Here's the first one. Yes. That's right. That's right. I am a Tennessee fan. Becoming a Tennessee fan for me was a spiritual experience. It really was a spiritual decision. Here's why. Very early on in my life, I started looking around the Southern Conference, right? And I thought about Alabama. You ever been to Alabama? Alabama is a God-forsaken barren land, right? I mean, when you go through Chattanooga and you cross over into Alabama, it's like you're going into a completely different world. So it couldn't be Alabama. I thought a lot about Florida, right? I've been to Gainesville. It's like the modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. Those people are crazy down there in Gainesville. They just are, right? Thought about Georgia, and we've talked about Georgia before. Bless your hearts, Bulldogs. Your team colors are black and red. That's the colors of Satan and the flames of hell, right? I mean, so you can't pull for the Bulldogs, right? Yeah? And then there's South Carolina. I've only been to a game at South Carolina one time, and it was the weekend that Peyton Manning threw a perfect game. It was a great weekend to be a UT fan. But one of the things I noticed is every time the University of South Carolina scores a touchdown in their home stadium, William Bryce Stadium, there's something interesting that happens. A rooster crows. Yeah, that's weird. You'd think that happened in Alabama, right? But it actually happens in South Carolina. The rooster crows. And so here's what I know about roosters. There's a guy named Peter in the Bible. And Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and the reason he knew he denied him 3 times in the Bible, when he did it, a rooster crowed, right? See, it's a spiritual decision. So every time they score a touchdown and I hear that rooster crow, I know right there that somebody just denied to follow Jesus right there. They just denied Jesus. It's incredible, right? So, all right, here's one. Yeah. It's happened all weekend long. You get those 1 or 2 people, woo, yeah! And then everybody else like, hey, I'm about to get hammered, but yeah. Listen, I'm gonna leave you alone this weekend, okay? You already know, so I'm not gonna say it. Here's another good one. Yes. Absolutely, for God so loved the world, he gave us Juan Valdez. Amen, amen. This one I better hear some noise on. Last one. That's right. So you get the concept, right? A hashtag or a label identifies something. So let's think through this for a second. Who has the right to hashtag or label something or someone? Think about that for a second. Because I don't know that we really think about that. We use hashtags like crazy if you're on social media, but who has the right to place that hashtag on something or someone? There's really only 2 options if you think about it. The first option is it's the maker. So if somebody makes something, they have the right to hashtag or to label that something, right? For instance, Nike. I wear Nike. I love Nike. Nike's one of the few shoe manufacturers. I got a size 15 foot. Everyone except my wife and my family has a size 15 foot. Our shoe order bill online is staggering. But Nike, they're one of the few manufacturers that you can go to most big retail stores and find a 15. I'm wearing a size 15 right now. Nike has that swoosh, right? That's their logo. That's their mark. And everything that they make, whether it's shirts, shorts, socks, shoes, they always put that on there. And the reason they're able to put the swoosh on there is because they made that product. Therefore, they have the right to label it. I think about Apple, right? Talk about Apple a lot. If you have an Apple product, a MacBook, an iPhone, got an iPad, got an iPod. If you're like Paul Jones, our worship leader, maybe you got the iWatch, maybe you sit on an iToilet. I don't know what it is, right? Y'all know they don't make iToilets yet, right? I mean, can you imagine if they do create an iToilet? I mean, I'm gonna buy one, I don't care. They've all got that little apple on them, right? And the reason they're able to put that little apple is because they made it, right? So the maker has the right to place a label on what they've created. But then so can the buyer. The buyer has the right to label something, and we do it all the time. Guys, remember, first baseball glove, right? Back in the day where I lived, we had Kmart. That was pretty much it. So my dad took my brother and I to Kmart, and we bought baseball gloves. And the first thing my dad said was, when we got home, we didn't even put saddle soap on it. Remember having to put saddle soap on it? I mean, it was like a board until you got the thing loosened up. The first thing he wanted us to do was take a black marker and actually write our name in it because he bought it, right? We bought it. It belonged to us. So you can't leave here and go to Dick's Sporting Goods or run up to the Academy and take a Sharpie and just start signing all the gloves in their store, right? They've got some nice gloves, cost several $100s. If you go signing your name on all of their gloves, you're probably gonna get arrested, right? So you can only write your name on something that you actually purchased. So the maker and the buyer are the only ones that have the right to put a label on something. Now, I want you to hang in there with me. This is why this is important. Because it leads to a question I'm gonna ask you guys in just a second. And we're not gonna answer out loud, but I want you to be thinking about it. And I'll tell you up front, if you get the answer to this question right, everything changes. Doesn't matter if you are 12 or if you are 92 or somewhere in between. If you get the answer to this question right, it changes everything. So here's the question. In light of what we've just heard, who or what has the right to hashtag you? Seriously. Who or what has the right to label you? See, if we're gonna say that the maker and the buyer have the right to hashtag somebody, then who or what has the right to hashtag you? See, hashtags are powerful. Labels are powerful. And once you give yourself a label, or once somebody places a label onto you and you actually accept it, it literally takes control. It can control how we think, it can control what we do, and it certainly controls how we live every single day of our life. Once you take on that label, and listen, you gotta take it. Once you accept it, then it's off to the races. And so as an example of this, I wanna share with you some of my hashtags, some of the labels that I've dealt with my entire life. And at the end of it, we're gonna kind of see if it's possible that these hashtags or these labels, if they affected my life. So here we go. I was in the 4th grade. And I've always been a big kid. Now back in the day, I don't know what caused it, but it wasn't like today. In the 4th grade, I was 6 feet 1 inches tall, and I weighed 210, 215 pounds. So that meant that every other kid in my elementary school came up to about here on me. Now, I know it's not that way today. I mean, kids walk out of the womb that size. And I don't know if it's because all the junk's going in our food or what it is, but back then, I was like a Sasquatch. And so what that meant is kids were afraid of me, and so I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. But what I discovered in the 4th grade in particular, because my body was growing so fast, is that I really enjoyed food. Now I'm talking, listen, I like to eat, right? I mean, don't mess with me. I just do. And I figured that out, but that was okay because my body was growing, right? But it became a problem when I was a junior in high school. That summer going into my senior year, I was playing football, so the weight itself was no big deal. It was good to be kind of a bigger guy, right? I played center. If you're familiar with football, you know center is the most athletic position on the football field, right? So that was good. But that summer, though, I was living my life, and I got a phone call, and that phone call the guy on the other end was my father. And my father started telling me how my best friend Mitch, instead of going to school, drove his car into his garage, shut the garage, left it running, and he committed suicide. And that summer, I figured out that you could actually eat as a substitute to help you deal with your emotions. And that summer sent me on a lifelong battle where every emotion that comes into my life, my natural go-to, and maybe it's different for you, but my natural go-to is to go eat. Because when I eat, I feel comfort. And when I find comfort, I find peace. And so that sent me on this lifelong journey, man. I've had huge swings where my weight has gone through the roof, and then I've gone the other extreme where I am paper thin, and I very seldom am ever in between. Listen, when I went to seminary, and then we started having kids while I was trying to get out of seminary, it was unbelievable, man. I mean, it was massive. I would go to the top of the steps, be completely out of breath at 23 years old. And so the hashtag that I took on was the hashtag unattractive. Because for most of my life, I was considerably bigger than anybody else that I'd ever seen. While all of that was going on, about the same time, the Hamilton County schools in Chattanooga had standardized testing, and those are awesome, right? I mean, goodness gracious. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. In fact, I'll be honest with you, on my ACT, I made a 19. I barely got into the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. I don't know how I got into a near Ivy League seminary. I don't know. I don't test well. My grades have always been awful. But in the Hamilton County school system, when you hit 9th grade, that's your last grade of junior high school, and then you go to high school. So they had the standardized test that you would take in the fall, and then you would get the results in the spring. And that test was to determine what track you should take in high school. Should you go from high school straight into the workforce, or did they put you on a path where you would go through high school and then go on to college and maybe graduate school or whatever was in store for you? And so I took that test, and I'd actually kind of forgotten about it. The other part of that test, it wasn't just an evaluation of what track you should be on. It also made suggestions about what you should do with your life. And so in the spring of my 9th grade year, this guy, Mr. Gottschall, was my homeroom teacher. And the day came when he was handing the test back. And my result only had one option of what that test thought I should do for a living. And it just said, long haul truck driver, right? Now, listen, there's nothing wrong with that, you know? Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I like to drive. But here's the problem. When he handed me that test, I saw him coming down the aisle. And back then I went by Steve. And so he got to my desk and he had that test and he laid it on my desk and he looked at me and he said, "Steve, I guess you're just stupid." And so I took on the hashtag stupid. Here's what I know about middle school and high school kids. If they think they're stupid, or if somebody's telling them they're stupid, they're not going to try in school. And if you are here today and you are a parent and you need to motivate your child and you're telling your child, trying to motivate them that they're dumb, here's exactly what you just did. You told them you shouldn't try in school because you're never going to be good enough. So on top of feeling like Shrek and not exactly being the sharpest crayon in the box, I was also unbelievably shy. And when I say shy, I'm talking shy. I'm an introvert. And I know people don't believe that. You should see me right before the service or the second I finish speaking. There's a reason I disappear. It's because I'm freaking out. And if you're an introvert, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I was shy. And so not only was I big and at times overweight and going through school thinking I would be lucky if I was able to even get a diploma, then I also didn't have many friends because I was scared to death to step out of my shell. I'm the guy at every party. If you invite me to your house, I don't care how long we've known each other, even at my own life group, my small group will tell you, I'm the guy holding the wall up. And what happens is, as you get older, people say, well, you're aloof. Or I've had people say, well, you're just rude because you don't hang around and interact with people. I've had people not say to me, because they never tell you to your face, but I've had people say, man, you know, they're just jerks. And I know if you're an introvert, you know somebody said that about you. It's not that we're jerks. It's that oftentimes when we're in front of people, we're paralyzed. And it can be a very debilitating thing and very difficult to get out of your shell. And so here's the hashtag I took on from that. It's the hashtag disappointment, because I felt like for much of my life, I was letting every single person I came into contact with down. And see, this one gets a lot of us, especially the men in the room, because you've dealt with this your whole life maybe, because you felt like you were disappointing your dad. And maybe he's been gone 5, 10, 15, maybe he's been gone 20 years. And yet every single day you get up and you run as fast as you can run, trying to chase after the approval of a dead guy laying in the ground. See, it's powerful, and it can affect everything. My last hashtag is the hashtag regret. And again, if you're here today and you're in middle school or you're in high school, I really want you to listen to me. 90% of the regrets that I have in my life are the direct result of what I did between the ages of about 14 and 22. You may not believe me, and you may not believe your parents, and you may not believe another adult in your life, but you need to understand that the decisions that you make will affect you 20, 30, 40 years down the road. They really are that big of a deal. Every decision has a consequence. And there are people all over this room and all over the place, anybody that's listening to me, you know firsthand, because you've lived through those consequences. And maybe that's you. You may feel this way because of something you did or because of something somebody did to you. And it may have happened 20 years ago, or it may have happened just last night. And here's what I know about this label in particular. It is unimaginably powerful. And it influences us, and it controls us. Now, quick question. Do you think any of those tags or labels had any influence on my life? Absolutely. Because it's those labels that help me define who I was. Here's what happens. When you define yourself inaccurately, you'll always do things that you wind up wishing you'd never done. And here's what I know about everybody in this room, everybody on every campus, every human being that is watching us online right now, and everybody that's going to be listening to a podcast later today or earlier this week. Here's what I know about all of us. All of us have hashtags. And all of us have labels. Some of them we put on ourselves, and some of them have been placed on us by other people, and they are powerful. And here's why. Because when you live with these kind of labels, they have a tendency to lock us in and to lock God out. See, if you believe you're stupid, or if you believe you're unattractive, or if you believe you're broken, or if you believe you're unlovable, I mean, you put whatever word you want to after that hashtag. If you actually believe that, it has a tendency to lock us inside. And if we're locked inside of ourselves, it is virtually impossible for God to get in, because all we keep hearing in our mind, no matter what somebody says, is failure or hopeless or ugly or dumb or lost or forgotten or broken or useless. And it just plays over and over and over again. And listen, don't try to tell me it's not, because I've seen it every service. It's not just me. It's gobs of us sitting here right now. That's a very dangerous place to be. So what about you guys? What's your hashtag? For some of us, maybe it's divorced. This is fascinating to me. We live in a culture where divorce is not an anomaly. It's not something that happens on occasion. It happens every single day, and there are people in this room. You've been through that. You understand what that battlefield is like. You've lived through the consequences, right? Because divorce always has a consequence. There's collateral damage everywhere, especially if you have kids involved. What I find interesting is that happens every single day, and yet here in the South in particular, and I'll tell you, it's the church's fault. Because when people follow Jesus and they get involved in a local church, over time, they start to forget that they had a hashtag too. And they start thinking, we all think we're better than everybody else. And so especially when it comes to divorce, especially if you are a mom, people look down their nose at you and you get labeled as divorced. And that affects the rest of your life. Listen, I'm here to tell you today, this is gospel truth. You are not gonna go to hell if you go through a divorce, because there is nothing that the grace of God cannot cover. Now, I'm not telling you I'm for it. I'm not telling you it is a wise decision. All I'm saying is, if your marriage goes south and you've done everything you can do and you can't keep it together, all I'm saying is it is possible to make it through that and to build a better life. We have got to get to, but see, man, listen, you live with that hashtag and you take it the rest of your life, it is unbelievable the control that that one simple word has over people. Now, I know some of you guys are uncomfortable, right? I grew up in a very conservative tradition, man. If you got divorced, you had to leave the church. That's stupid. I mean, that's just stupid. That's like punishing your kid by telling them, well, you're not gonna get to go to church this week. That's the very thing they need. So why would you prevent somebody from coming to get the very thing that they need? And yet, we do it all the time. Man, I can't get off on that sermon. All right. Good. Here, listen. Here's a good one right here. Y'all gonna love this, boy. Had sex before marriage. Did you hear the seat cushions? Yeah? Feels tense, doesn't it? Feels tense. It's all right, nothing wrong with tension. Here's what I know about that hashtag. And you can fight me on it if you want to. There's a lot of guilt. What I've tried to tell my kids, this is not God saying, I want something from you. It's God saying, I want something for you. Just wait. Because here's why. Sex is probably the most intimate relationship that two human beings can share together. Because you can't, well, it's hard to do with your clothes on. And what happens is when you have sex with someone outside of marriage, that person gets a piece of your soul. And you don't ever get that soul back. And so for the rest of your life, you're gonna have that little bit of a gap, and maybe it's just a tiny little piece. But see, here's how I know that's true. Let's say you get 20, 30 years under your belt and you're on Facebook one day. Isn't it interesting how often old flames come up? I wonder what he's doing. I wonder what she's doing. It's because they got a piece of your soul. And you're gonna want that piece of soul back, and you'll do whatever you gotta do to find it. That's why that's how every affair on Facebook starts. I just wonder what they're up to. If you're in high school, and if you're a girl, please listen to me. That guy that you think you're in love with, he doesn't even know it yet, but he's a jerk. And I don't care if he is 18, 19 years old, he is not a man yet. And odds are, you are not gonna marry that kid. Odds are, by the end of the summer, you're never gonna talk to him again. So why in the world would you wanna give a piece of your soul to that jerk that you're never gonna meet again? Some people have been pushing back all weekend. Well, Stephen, I ain't doing nothing. I can't try out first. Are you kidding me? That's dumb. And yet there's so much guilt and so much shame. I mean, people, once you get that hashtag, it makes it that much easier to keep doing it, because you convince yourself, well, that's what everybody thinks about me anyway. Everybody's saying behind my back, I'm sleeping with everybody, so I might as well go sleep with everybody. And it gets you on that perpetual treadmill, man, and it's exhausting. Here's one. Can't let go. Maybe you did something, or maybe something happened to you, and you just can't give it up. You can't let go. In fact, maybe it's been a part of your life so long that it's actually become a part of your identity. And when you think about letting whatever that thing go, you think about the anger and you think about the bitterness and you think about the frustration and you think about the fear, you can't let it go anymore because it's a part of your identity, man. It's there when you wake up in the morning. It gives you life through the day because if nothing else goes your way, you got that one thing to be mad about. You got that one thing to stew over. It's that one thing that drives every tweet and every post. You think about it all day long. It's become who you are. Can't let go. This is a good one for our church. Addicted. Isn't it funny? You don't even have to know somebody. As soon as you hear that person's an addict, that thought pops in your mind. Well, what you are is what you're always going to be. I don't believe that. We've built this whole church on recovery. You can't tell me that that's true. You may have that battle your whole life, but I've seen it too many times. People finally figure out they got to have Jesus. They get in some accountability. They start finding sobriety. They may be an addict, but they're free the second they start that first day of sobriety. And I've seen it decade after decade now, people who are getting their life back. But yet our world will say, well, you're just an addict. And when you take on that label, that means that you're worthless. Listen, there are people all over this room right now. And listen, if you're a goody two-shoes and you got your life together and nothing's messed up, you're going to freak out if you find out they're an addict. Because there are people sitting in this room right now that have lost everything. They have fallen flat on their face. They understand what pain feels like, but they found freedom. See? Listen, you got somebody in your life that's an addict, you drag their tail here on Thursday nights because they ain't gonna be an addict long. Last one, overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. You know what you can do when you hashtag yourself with this one? You can do anything you want to. I was just overwhelmed. Hey, it was Memorial Day weekend, man. I was hanging out with my boys. Yeah, we drank some beers. I was fine, had to get home. Put the keys in the ignition, drove down the road, got pulled over. DUI. But I was overwhelmed. I stepped outside the bounds of my marriage and I slept with that person, but I was just overwhelmed. I went there and I did that. I made a really bad financial decision, but I'm just overwhelmed. See, now I'm not knocking being overwhelmed. I'm not saying overwhelmed's not legit, because it is, especially right here in our little corner of the world. What I am saying is, though, that if we accept that tag or that label, we allow it to control us. Overwhelmed is a powerful feeling. So with all that in mind, here's the big idea. This is what we got to walk out here with today. And some of you are going, he hadn't even got scripture yet. I'm going to. And we're going to get out on time. I'm saving it for the end because I want you to remember it. So don't freak out, all right? But here's what I want us to walk out with today. And you can write this down. It's right there in your notes. The one who made you and bought you is the only one who has the right to hashtag you. The one who made you and bought you. That's not your Facebook friends. And by the way, your Facebook friends probably aren't your friends. Maybe a few of them are, but we all on social media, we live off each other's highlight reel. We don't ever show the lowlights. So whatever it is that you're chasing after that you think everybody else has on Facebook, they're chasing after the stuff that you've put on Facebook because they think you got your life together. The one who made you and bought you is the only one who has the right to hashtag you. See, it begins by understanding that God made you. God made you. Psalm 139 teaches us that we were fearfully and wonderfully made. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. So if you got that hashtag of accident, don't believe it. You were fearfully and wonderfully made. Ephesians 2 says that God made us on purpose, with a purpose, for a purpose. See, God made you. And not only did God make you, he actually paid for you. God paid for us. It cost him the blood of his one and only son to pay for our sins. I mean, how awesome is that sacrifice? He made us, and he paid for us, and he has greater plans for us. Therefore, he's the only person that ought to put a hashtag or label on us ever. So let's walk through what Jesus said in relation to what we just heard about hashtags and labels. It's Matthew chapter 11, just a couple of verses. In fact, my hope for all of us who call Cokesbury home is that this will be our text this week. If you don't have a normal Bible study routine, let it be the first thing you read every morning. Let it be the last thing you read every night. But I want us to live into this. Jesus, he makes a staggering claim. Right here in Matthew 11, verse 28, he gives both an invitation and a promise. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Jesus says, "Come to me." He doesn't say, "Go away." And who Jesus chooses to invite is fascinating to me. He doesn't say, "Come to me, all you who have all your stuff together." And here's why I like that. I've been working in the church for over half of my life. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. In fact, the people who show up and act like their life's perfect, almost 100% of the time, they're the people whose world is falling apart the fastest. They just don't know what to do, so they keep hiding behind the facade. See, that business of hiding, it's a big deal. It's present in your life, and it's present in my life, man. We're afraid if people saw the ugly stuff that they're not gonna love us anymore. And so sometimes all we gotta do is just say, well, look, for 1 hour, or maybe hour 5 if Stephen doesn't shut up, maybe for 1 hour, I can act like I've got my stuff together. Nobody's got their stuff together. And so what Jesus says is, look, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. That's those of us who have hashtags. That's those of us that have to live with labels. Because living your life under a label, that's exhausting. See, the quickest way to lose sight in regards to what God says about us is to become obsessed with what other people are saying about us. And there are far too many followers of Jesus. This is just for the Christians in the room. There are far too many followers of Jesus that care way more about what their Facebook friends think than what their Heavenly Father thinks. And when you get those two messed up, when you start living your life by Facebook and the expectation Facebook sets, you're locking yourself in and you're locking God out. If we spent more time wondering what does God actually think about us, we might actually find the freedom that we need to be the people that God needs us to be. And this sorry world might actually have a chance to get saved. But instead, we get so caught up in our own junk that we can't see that God's doing something even bigger. So Jesus says, you don't have to carry that weight anymore. Now watch this. Come to me, all you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Isn't that awesome? We all want rest, Christian or non-Christian. Man, it'd be great to get some rest. Amen, parents of young kids? Wouldn't that be awesome? He goes on in verse 29, take my yoke upon you. Yoke is kind of like teaching. In the Middle East where Jesus was, they had to plow the fields, and so they would get a couple of ox. And there's this yoke that they would place over their shoulders. And what that would do is it would line the two up together, and it would force them to walk in steps so that as they pulled, they would maximize their power, and they would maximize the effort, and they were able to plow in a straight line. And so what Jesus is saying is, what I want you to do is I want you to connect yourself, take my yoke, let's get side by side and start, connect yourself to me through my teaching. But he doesn't just say, take my yoke, he also says, learn from me. Learn from me. You can't learn from our society because our society will always lead us astray. Culture always gets it wrong. What was cool 10 years ago is not cool today. And what is cool today is not going to be cool 10 years from now. So all of you skinny jean wearers, stop it. Okay? You're on the clock. Just quit. Just quit. All right? Society always gets it wrong. So Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. Our world is not gentle, and it sure ain't humble. In fact, our world will try to lure us into a system And then when we do what the world tells us to do, it's the world that's going to condemn us for doing exactly what the world told us to do. It's crazy. Jesus said, whatever hashtag or label you got on you, connect yourself to me. Now notice what he didn't say. Jesus didn't promise that he would take that label away. And Jesus didn't promise that he would even make that label better. What Jesus promised was, I'm gonna walk through you with you through it. See, remember, yoke equals together. We're gonna do this thing together. And I am convinced that the more we do things with Jesus, over time, the more he changes our perspective. Till it's at the point where I don't care what people think about me, man. Some of you are gonna be mad at me today and you're gonna fire me an email and you're going, I'm gonna get him. I don't care. I don't care. I've been set free by Jesus. That's what happens to those labels when you find Jesus. So here's how I want to close. Whoa, boy, we got to hurry, don't we? I want to give you a couple of hashtags real quickly. And if you're here today and you're a Christian, these are true about you. And if you're not a Christian, they can be true about you before you leave this room. So take whatever hashtag, whatever label you've been dealing with, and replace it with this one, accepted. You're accepted. Doesn't matter what anybody else has said. Doesn't matter what anybody else does. Doesn't matter what that voice in the back of your head keeps telling you about yourself. In Jesus, you are accepted. See, here's what I figured out in my own walk with Jesus. When I gave my life to Jesus, it took me a long time to figure out I was accepted. I thought I had to clean myself up. I thought I had to start saying the right things. I believed I had to start walking the right way so that when people looked at me, they knew that I was a Christian. And what I figured out is Jesus, he just accepted me for who I was. Now, because he loves me, he didn't want me to stay the same. And so my life has been this journey of transformation. I'm a lot better man today than I was 2 years ago. My wife will tell you that. I'm a heck of a better father today than I was 10 years ago. My kids will tell you that. I'm a better pastor today, whether you believe it or not, than I was 20 years ago. I mean, it's just this evolutionary, this growth process that Jesus has a way of doing, man. He gets inside of you and he starts to change you from the inside out. You're accepted. You just are. Here's another good one, beautiful. Now, I know I just lost every man in the room because the last thing you want is your pastor standing up going, hey, Troy, you're a beautiful man, dude. I like it, beautiful man. But here's what I know, I just got the full attention of every woman in the room. Because the cry of every woman's heart is, am I beautiful? And listen, don't even try to tell me that's not the cry of your heart, because I live with one. And I've watched her every day struggle with that question. Am I beautiful? I've watched every girl that has ever come into our life ask that same question. And I just want you to know, you are beautiful. You don't have to live up to some standard that some magazine set, because guess what? The person on the front of that magazine, they don't look like that either. You are beautiful. Doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter the length of your hair. It doesn't matter what somebody else has said about you. You're just beautiful because God created you. He breathed life into you. You are beautiful. And then finally, listen, I know, give me 1 minute and we're gone, I promise, okay? We're gonna take communion and you're gone. New, last one, new. I grew up here in the South, and in the South we have a term that if you're not from the South, you may not know what that means. You're familiar when somebody says, I had to take him out behind the woodshed, right? You know what that means, right? Jesus didn't have to take me behind the woodshed. I thought he would take me behind the woodshed, he would wear me out, and then he would take duct tape and he would try to tape up the patches and the holes and the brokenness in my life. What I failed to realize is when I gave my life to Jesus, he just took a big old giant eraser and he erased the entire landscape of my life. And everything from my past, every label, every feeling, every mistake, every sin, it's just gone. And it doesn't mean that I don't still deal with the ghost of those problems, but what it does mean is I was a new creation. See, that's what happens when you give your life to Jesus. It's not a better version of you. He gives you a whole new you. And that new you has been set free to enjoy the very fullness that life has to offer. And people of Cokesbury Church, listen to me. If we are going to do what I think God is asking us to do, which is do whatever we can to change this city, then there's more and more of us that got to quit hiding. We've got to come out of the shadows, and we've got to stand at the foot of the cross, and we've got to claim the goodness and the grace and the mercy of not a dead Jesus, but a, hey, I came out of the tomb and I'm alive Jesus.